Councillor Robinson, you are now live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening and welcome everybody to the February Rushcliffe Borough Council Cabinet meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that this Cabinet meeting is actually being live streamed on YouTube. Recording the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England Regulations 2012 Act, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings are not under the Council's control. All participants are reminded to ensure that the audio of the meeting is as clear as possible, that microphones are muted as a default setting to keep the background noise to a minimum unless you are speaking. So could I first please do a call around the Cabinet members to confirm they can hear and see proceedings, starting with Councillor Edivine.
Yes, Councillor Robinson, I can see and hear.
Councillor English.
Yeah, can confirm I can hear and see.
Councillor Upton.
Yes, Chairman.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, I can see and hear.
Yeah, Councillor Brennan.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, if I just ask officers, starting with Mrs. Marriott.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Mrs. Sewell.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Mr. Linfield.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Mr. Banks.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Mrs. Ashmore.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Okay, and Mrs. Tambini.
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Okay, we've also got two group leaders on the call as well. So, Mrs. Thomas, can you hear?
Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. And Mr. Gray.
I can see here. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you. We've also got two members of the public with us on the call this evening. So a very warm welcome and good evening to you both. It's very good to see you. So, Mr. East, can you hear us okay?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Collison, are you okay? Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm just going to change the agenda. Item 4, we're just going to switch with item 5. So we're going to ask the citizens questions before the opposition leaders questions. So I just want to mention if people would like to speak, if they could use the raise hand function that we have under Zoom. And in respect of voting, I will ask any councillor who wishes to abstain or vote against the motion to actually raise their hand first. If no councillor indicates, then we'll take that the item is actually carried. Thank you. So first of all, Mrs. Tambini, could I have any apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence, Councillor Robinson.
Okay, any declarations of interest? Okay, I'd like to move the minutes from the meeting of the 12th of January 2021. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'd like to second them, Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Edwin to second that, proposed by myself. Do you have any abstentions or anybody against taking those minutes as recorded? No, so they're accepted unanimously. Okay, if we could move then on to citizens' questions. If I could take the first question, please, from Ms. Collison. If you'd like to come onto video and unmute yourself. And if you'd like to ask your question, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The sixth objective of the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy is to seek to ensure positive impact of development on wildlife and biodiversity, whilst eliminating negative impact. And the report sets out 6 initiatives designed to meet this objective, including a reference to local planning policy and using hedgerow regulations and tree preservation orders. Without meaningful targets, however, to measure the council's performance in protecting biodiversity and hedgerows on large housing developments, residents are blind to what we may be losing. Would the council consider including measurable targets, setting a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain target to be included as a condition in all large site planning permissions, and including the 10% biodiversity net gain target for large site developments in the conservation strategy document? Also setting a target in the conservation strategy of 0 net loss of hedgerows in Rushcliffe as a result of large housing development, and making a commitment to publishing hedgerow and biodiversity net gains or losses annually for large housing developments in Rushcliffe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Collison. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms Collison, for your question. You're clearly aware of our proposed new Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy, which we're discussing later this evening. As I understand it, you are asking the council to consider introducing and publishing annually some measurable biodiversity targets for large housing developments, and you have a particular interest in hedgerows. Well, recommendation C of the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy report this evening says that the council should work with the neighbouring local planning authorities and other partner organisations to introduce biodiversity net gain policies that complement the nature conservation strategy's objectives. And this will give the opportunity to discuss and evaluate your suggestions. But perhaps some more relevance to your suggestions is that the government has an emerging environment bill, and this is likely to introduce legislation that will require developments to achieve at least a 10% net gain for biodiversity, and with this requirement to be applied to planning permissions and to have associated monitoring. Therefore, your suggestions, I believe it's best to await the outcomes of the proposed Environment Act so that this council can then align any new biodiversity and hedgerow targets with the national ones.
Okay, is that everything, Councillor Upton?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for your question, Ms Collison. Could I have Mr East, if you'd like to come onto video and unmute yourself, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yeah, good evening, councillors. Having read through the updated Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy, the 2021 and 25, I'm heartened by the importance our council is putting on the fight against habitat loss and climate change. I would agree that it is important to encourage creation of new sites, and nature's recovery requires us to link and connect sites to allow the spread of wild native plants and animals. Hedges and grassy verges are nature's highways, so yes, we should be seeking to protect areas and encourage sympathetic management of our grassland. Would the council add a KPI to their natural conservation strategy that includes a numerical target for councils to reduce and eventually stop altogether the use of herbicides and pesticides throughout our parishes and wards?
Thank you for your question, Mr East. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for your question, Mr East. You do raise a very important issue. The use of herbicides and pesticides invokes very strong passions in a lot of people. Some people feel very strongly that we need to use them, others equally, if not more so, that we don't, and we should avoid them at all costs. It is encouraging, and I'm also very pleased to see that the Nature Conservation Strategy on tonight's agenda does include a number of references to the good management of verges, roadside hedges, etc., to protect plants and wildlife. Unfortunately, I don't think this strategy can go much further at this time with regard to setting targets to restrict the use of pesticides or herbicides generally, as in many cases the areas that are often managed and maintained are done so by other organisations out with the council and often private companies. However, the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy Group, which is the partnership organisation that has overseen and pulled together this strategy, will, I'm sure, consider your views as they move forward with the development of this strategy. That said, as a council and working with our contractors, we do already consider how best to minimise our use of herbicides on the land that we do own. And as part of the implementation strategy, we will work to ensure that we continue to look for opportunities to use alternative means of controlling vegetation in the areas where we do need to, and to avoid it where we don't. So once again, it is a very important issue. It is one that we'll reflect on going forward, and can I thank you for raising the matter with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. East and Ms. Collison. If you'd like to leave the call now, thank you. Lovely. Okay, going to the next item on the agenda now will be the opposition leaders' questions. If I could ask Councillor Gray, please, to put your question.
Try my video. There we go. Thank you. I just want to say those were great citizens' questions. It's really good, really heartening to hear those. I could probably do with some help with them for writing mine in the future. Mine is somewhat short by comparison. I'd like to know how we have considered the full implications of our change in policy for the parking enforcement item and its knock-on effect on partner and former partner organisations.
Okay, Councillor English.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, thanks for that question, Councillor Gray. I can assure you there's been lots and lots of dialogue and consultation between all the parties involved. I'd like to say it's a Brexit exit where everybody's actually talking to each other and everybody's on board to make sure it's a satisfying and satisfactory agreement between everybody. So the report actually does outline all those mitigation issues that you're asking for, and they have been given full consideration.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Councillor Gray?
I don't on this occasion. Thanks very much for the answer.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Gray. Appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my question's about the parking proposal as well. Parking enforcement staff are very rarely seen in Eastleigh, despite ongoing resident concerns about highway obstruction and infringements in the parking bays with time limits. Will we see any improvement under the new arrangement?
Yeah, thank you.
That's English.
Thank you. The council civil enforcement officers do visit all areas of the borough. They check for compliance and they issue tickets where there is a non-compliance. They do need to witness any sort of obstruction offences, and any sort of willful obstruction is a matter for the police to undertake. So in a normal year, yes, they do attend Eastleigh at least once a week, and they have issued fixed penalty notices for a range of parking offences, including parking on or adjacent to the yellow lines. And if you do have a particular problem, I'm sure they will target an area if you have got a particular problem, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Thomas?
No, it's okay.
Lovely. I think you said no, couldn't hear you very well. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Okay, moving next item on the agenda, actually quite relevant, is parking. So, Councillor English.
Well, lost me thing. Locked out. Hang on a sec. I'll have to read it. The screen's gone. Okay. Thank you, Leader. This report is seeking the approval of how Rushcliffe Borough Council managed its 27 car parks. 12 of those are enforceable. Now, there's a full list in Appendix 1, and it's continued to the on-street parking agreement by the Cabinet, agreeing to the 4 recommendations. So the first one is to approve the withdrawal from the Car Parking District Partnership, which includes withdrawal from using the procured county services for enforcement officers and cash collections, withdrawal from managing Nottinghamshire's County Council's on-street enforcement and responsibility for deficit liability. B, approves the employment of enforcement officers. C, approves the use of Broxtowe Borough Council's cash collection service. And D, delegates to the executive manager for neighbourhoods to be able to negotiate an agreement for the continued use of the processing unit of Nottinghamshire County Council for managing the council's penalty notices. So in order to fulfil statutory obligations, the council must ensure appropriate arrangements are in place to operationally manage its car parking functions, which must be efficient and cost effective. In 2008, a district partnership was formed with Rushcliffe and 6 other Nottinghamshire authorities with Broxtowe Borough Council, and they were managing the operations of the parking services for both car parks and on street under a service level agreement. Also for the provision of enforcement officers, cash collection and penalty notice processing. It is an incredibly positive partnership with excellent relationships. However, in 2014, under a partnership agreement, Rushcliffe became responsible for managing the on-street parking in the borough. It was agreed that any surpluses generated would be reinvested into the service. However, the council will be liable to cover any deficits. Until recently, that risk was unlikely. It has now changed due to the pressure on the county council on street surplus, and that's due to the fixed income of maximum fines, which have been set by government, and they've not increased since 2008, and higher costs by the contractor provider for the enforcement officers and their services. In addition, Nottingham County Council has covered Broxtowe's costs for the running of Rushcliffe's on-street parking, which is due to cease at the end of this financial year. As such, the cost of Broxtowe managing Rushcliffe's on-street parking will be passed directly to Rushcliffe Borough Council at an additional charge of £20,000 per annum. This will double the current service management fee from £21,000 to £41,000 per annum. The council will still pay the 21k towards the off-street parking arrangement. For the short term, and due to the protracted pandemic, the county council have taken back the management of the off-street parking, but the duration of which is not yet known. When it does stop, the additional £20,000 service charge will be incurred. So the county council has raised with councils in the partnership to which services they would like to continue with under the next round of their procurement, which has provided a great opportunity for Rushcliffe to review the service in line with the council's governance practice for best value for money. So in addition to the £20,000 cost saving, there will be savings of between £7,000 and £13,000 per annum in the cost of enforcement officers by employing officers directly against the current staff charge out rates. A further saving of £11,158 per annum is achievable for cash collections by using the Broxtowe Borough Council's contractor instead of the more expensive service currently provided. The high uptake on cashless Ringo system could also bring future savings. The report proposes to retain the use of county central processing unit to handle Rushcliffe penalty notices and appeals under a separate agreement with the county. They have provisionally agreed to this arrangement. The service runs well and is cost effective. It is not considered as viable or even a desired option for Rushcliffe to undertake, as there is no cost to the service, but Rushcliffe Borough Council receives an annual percentage cut from the fines received, which I believe is in the region of £20,000 to £30,000 a year. In addition to these cost efficiencies, the council could plan for developing the enforcement role into a wider community warden function and explore apprentice options. They'll be localised, on the ground, eyes and ears, high-vis guardians acting as council ambassadors. The current service provision, which contributes to the community safety, will be kept and expanded on, including monitoring of car parks, reporting car parking defects, alerting and responding to health and safety issues, responding to residents' queries, and checking that the lighting and equipment in the car park is working and in good order in order to comply with Section 17 of the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998. The withdrawal from the partnership requires 24 months notice, but it has been agreed due to the extended service provision contract running beyond its term due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A natural break point for the withdrawal will be June 2022. Things may change before that date, requiring further review, consideration and approval, but this report is set on the current position for the intention of withdrawing on or before that date for the reasons outlined. There are some financial implications due to the recent and understandably dramatic reduction in car park revenue, which is totally due to the COVID-19 with a forecast of a £45,000 overall deficit for this service in 2021. The estimated £41,000 savings in this report have been compared to the 2019-2020 receipts. The legal implications are as 7.2 in the report for the consideration of employment law for 2P, which is the transfer of undertakings and protection of employment law for any staff transferring and legal reviews of the service agreements. So if I can refer you back to the report, 7.1 shows the alternative options that have been considered and rejected for the reasons stated. Appendix 2 details the advantages, risks and mitigation actions. I know a lot of research and officers' time has been put into this detailed report, which if adopted can only enhance Rushcliffe's continued strive to provide the best and the most cost-effective service to its residents and increase positivity from its many visitors. Anything that will complement the next budget needs to be embraced after the huge hit it has suffered. I'm favourably supporting these proposals as the cost efficiency and recommendations will provide ownership, clear and tangible direction in the managing of the council's own destiny, something they have a proven track record of achieving in excellency, endorsed by the National Awards for Safer Car Parks. So I ask you to support the recommendations as in 2, A, B and C. Then for efficiency and to minimising bureaucracy, for the Executive Manager for Neighbourhoods to be delegated to negotiate an agreement with Nottingham County Council as in D. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor English. I'm very happy to second these proposals. It is timely that we review how we manage our on and off street parking provision across the borough. The previous partnership arrangements as set out in the paper have worked very well. However, it's always prudent to keep such arrangements under review and make sure they remain fit for purpose and value for money for local residents. Given the proposed changes to the partnership, now is the right time for us to review what we need to get out of it and how we can best work with those partners. It's anticipated that the new arrangements set out in the paper and by Councillor English will provide cost savings of around 41,000 per annum. The details of the new partnering arrangement I won't go through, they're set out in the paper and Councillor English has covered them comprehensively, but I would like to just draw your attention to and welcome the proposals for the Borough Council to employ enforcement officers directly, albeit under the management of Broxtowe Borough Council. Bringing that service essentially in-house will enable the role of enforcement officers to be broadened to encompass this community warden or community ambassador type role, which will provide additional reassurance to residents, as Councillor English said, identify car park maintenance issues, potentially link up with the WISE, Enviro, crime pilot, if that were to be rolled forward, and so on. So enhancing and broadening the role of the enforcement officers will help the council to support us and our role in creating a sense of place for all residents across the borough and for being part of that community, not simply seen as an enforcement role in its entirety. So for these reasons, for reasons of efficiency and cost savings, I'm very happy to second the recommendations moved by Councillor English as set out in the paper at paragraph 2.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? No, very comprehensive support. So we'll take that then to the vote. So recommendation set out by Councillor English, second by Councillor Brennan. Anybody wishes to abstain or object to those recommendations? No. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So that is carried unanimously. Okay, moving on to the next item on the budget. Councillor Moore.
Good evening. I'm going to present the budget for 2021-22. You've all had the papers, all 99 pages of it. So I'm sure you'll all be pleased to hear I'm going to praise it quite quickly. So as everyone is aware this year, this last year has been unprecedented in so many ways, one of which has been the economic effect on local government finances. During my presentation now, I will be using the word prudent regularly. I'm very relieved that over the years with my predecessors, this has been a prudent council. enabling us to deal with most of the economic damage created by COVID. And I'm grateful that we have built reserves accordingly. This is a prudent budget and is written to ensure the council remains financially resilient and able to deliver the services it must by law. The budget is also designed to focus on economic recovery, which will be very much needed as we deal with COVID and its after effects over the next year. It's also designed to support the most vulnerable in our community, to ensure health and well-being remains a high priority, and to remain committed to carbon reduction and supporting the environment. Fundamentally, it's pretty obvious by watching the TV, there is considerable risk going forward with the budget in terms of COVID, business rates, fairer funding, and our income streams. And a good example of this is the closure of our leisure centres, and we hope these will be opening up fairly soon. Being prudent remains the most sensible course of action, with reserves to remain around 6 to 7 million over the term of the medium-term financial strategy, at a period when financial risk has never been greater. Any opportunity we can to increase reserves to deliver the council's corporate priorities and to mitigate future risk will be taken. Estimates for 21-22 have made assumptions regarding loss of income and increase of expenditure as a result of COVID. The net deficit position being £1.5 million over the next 2 years. I would confirm this is a manageable risk. I will now turn to our capital programme. As I've mentioned in many previous cabinets, the council has an ambitious programme, and you'll hear more about it tonight. And we still plan to invest over 38 million in the borough over the next few years. Our major investments are the Bingham Hub, the crematorium, upgrade a facility at leisure centres, vehicle replacement, and support for affordable housing. Details of all our capital expenditure are in the report on Appendix 4. Now, in all likelihoods, we will, over the next few years, have to borrow to fund these investments. But the planned borrowing repayments are built into this budget and into the revised medium-term financial strategy. So in line with government referendum principles, the budget for 2021-22 proposes an increase in council tax of 3.24% to £147.36 for a Band D property. This is an increase of less than 9p a week, ensuring our council tax remains the lowest in Nottinghamshire and in the lowest quartile in England. The figures in the report show the various special expenses which are detailed. I will show those at the end of the presentation. At this stage, I think it's very important to acknowledge the additional financial support we've had from this government. We've had over £800,000 support just for running the council, which has been given to us from the government to mitigate loss of income, additional costs, support for homelessness and rough sleeping. And this has reduced some of the pressures that we are under. And once again, I have to acknowledge the government support in excess of £38 million of business support we have received and distributed to business in the borough in the past year. The council will continue to support the community, and we will always remain open for business. Now, to this end, you will notice a further recommendation that will be taken to full council regarding the Development Corporation, which will be a cornerstone of economic and business growth within the borough, with the future development of the power station site. So also consistent with our desire to reduce our carbon footprint. In essence, there is uncertainty as to the time of government approval, and any funding work is still being undertaken to ensure the building blocks are in place and resources are required to undertake this. We have proposed to cap at 1/3 of the funding at about £170,000, assuming the other local authority partners will do the same proportionately according to their level of initial commitment. To conclude, this budget and its uncertainty remains challenging. Our financial strategies continue the progress made to ensure that the Council's financial plans are robust, affordable and deliverable despite COVID and the pressures it has created. The budget is designed to ensure we maintain high quality services for current and future generations, a budget that is both financially and environmentally sustainable. As it's such an important document, I intend to read out fully the recommendations in a proposal, but I would like to take the opportunity of thanking both Peter Linfield and Sarah Whitaker and their teams for all the hard work that's gone into this 99-page document, which I'm sure you've all read. Right, the recommendations are: the Council adopts the budget settings report, the associated financial strategies 21-22 to 25-26, including the transformation strategy and efficiency plan. We adopt the capital programme as set out in Appendix 4. We adopt the capital investment strategy at Appendix 5. We set the Rushcliffe Council tax band for a Band D property at £147.36. This is an increase of £4.62 or 3.24%. We set the special expenses for West Bridgford at £49.65, for Keyworth at £3.41, for Ruddington at £4. We adopt the pay policy statement as at Appendix 7, and we agree the proposal that the year one funding for the Development Corporation is approved prior to receiving formal government approval, and financial support capped at £170,000. So, Councillor Robinson, I'm very happy to propose that we approve the 2021-22 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second now? Councillor Edering.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robinson. As Councillor Moore says in his very comprehensive coverage, it's been a year that has been very difficult, and so producing a budget that keeps our finances on an even keel is actually a great challenge. And Councillor Moore's favourite word here was prudence, or prudent. But I think we should also look at the fact that being prudent doesn't mean that we have to lack ambition. And the capital expenditure budget looks at the Bingham Leisure Hub and the new office space that we'll be delivering there to help start up small businesses. We referred to the business support, and that was nearly £40 million that has come from central government and been distributed through us to local businesses to help them in their time of need in the pandemic. The crematorium, which we'll be discussing later, also continues to show ambition. And as Councillor Moore says, the Development Corporation is a very important part of making Rushcliffe prosperous in the future. And I'm delighted to see that we're supporting the Development Corporation and hoping to get it off the ground through the interim vehicle that will be being set up. So I have no hesitation seconding the recommendation as set out by Councillor Moore.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Any other comments by Cabinet members? No. Okay. I'd just like to add my thanks to Mr. Linfield. Taking it back to your team, please. I appreciate how difficult it's been, certainly over this last year, as is any other year with government funding uncertainties, but particularly during the pandemic. And again, just echo the word ambition, as Councillor Edeby and Councillor Moore have put out there. Our ambitions as a council are still very, very strong, despite these very, very, very tough times. And it's a real credit to officers at this time and previous officers and members who have really managed this council very well to ensure we came into this pandemic very strong. And we know it's going to be very, very testing for many councils. So I'm very pleased the resilience that we built into there, and we use this word prudent a lot. So those recommendations are set out by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Edeby. Do you have anybody who wishes to abstain or object to those recommendations? No. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Okay, moving on. The next item on the crematorium, Councillor Edivine.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I would like to propose this recommendation, and as the agenda says, it's a crematorium update. This is an ongoing project, and it's vital that we build this facility and make sure it's fit for a long-term future. And you'll see from the recommendation that we are being asked to approve an additional £2 million in the capital programme to make sure that we do deliver this facility at the highest to the highest spec possible. I won't go into the strong case for delivering this facility, as this has been previously covered, and as the paper says, it's an update. But I think it's suffice to say that this delivery of a crematorium in Rushcliffe will bring a welcome service to our residents, and especially as we expect our population to grow in the coming decade. The project cost has increased for 3 specific reasons, and those are outlined in section 4 of the report. Certain projects that we undertake can be liable for VAT, and external advice has highlighted that this is one of them, and so this becomes an extra cost. We've always wanted to ensure that any new facility was state-of-the-art and contributed to our aim of minimising any carbon footprint as we pursue our carbon reduction policy in the council. And the recommendation is that we use an electric cremator to achieve this. Again, this is a more expensive solution than using other options such as a gas cremator. But it is better for the environment, as well as having a longer working lifespan. So it's cost effective in the long term. And the final element of the additional cost is our enhanced landscaping proposals. And that is to ensure that the site we maintain a green site with substantial tree planting and encouragement of biodiversity across the site. Our officers have, as the report shows, carried out detailed benchmarking to ensure that we get value for money. And I believe they've demonstrated this quite categorically in their comparisons with other local authorities and crematorium that have been delivered or are in the process of being delivered. So I have no hesitation in proposing the recommendation set out in paragraph 2 on page 123 of the Cabinet Papers. And that is, it is recommended that the Cabinet supports the allocation of an additional £2 million in the capital programme for delivery of a new crematorium to be included in the Council's medium-term financial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder on this? Councillor Moore.
Yeah, this item really follows on very much from the budget setting. And I have to say, in the crazy world that we live in now with the economic carnage going on, it would be very easy to pull some of these capital investments and say, let's delay them, let's just not go ahead while we've got this economic damage. But I don't agree with that. I think that the word Councillor Robinson used earlier, ambition, is what it's all about. And the fact that we are prepared to go ahead and invest in the borough. And I talked about £38 million, and Councillor Edivine, the crematorium is just a part of that £38 million capital investment. And I think coming out of the pandemic, these schemes are going to be more and more needed. The job creation, the investment, the knock-on effect within the construction market for all this. And this will help Rushcliffe coming out of the pandemic. So yes, I'm very happy to support it. And I think it shows very much the strength of our ambition of moving forward through the pandemic. Thank you. I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. I think, as Councillor Edivine said, that we discussed at Cabinet a number of times the strengths and the positiveness of this project, and it is absolutely key, I think, to our community facilities to bring this forward, despite all the financial challenges we've actually got. So, again, like Councillor Moore, I'm absolutely delighted. We use this word ambition a lot, but this is an absolutely key project, and I'm delighted officers now have moved this forward. We appreciate these financial changes are necessary, but I very much look forward to us taking this forward. Councillor Upton, do you want to speak?
Well, yes, briefly, if I may, Chairman. I mean, as you say, we've agreed to build this new facility, and I'm very pleased with that. But it needs to be as sustainable and green as we can reasonably afford it. And I think this budget will give us the best value in that sense. So I'm pleased to support the report.
Thank you very much indeed. So the recommendations that have been set out by Councillor Edivin, seconded by Councillor Moore. Does anybody object or wishes to abstain? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9. This is a fairly standard report we're doing now, which is the COVID-19 update. We did this in December, so this report actually is from December. If I could just ask members just go straight to item 4.4, which is the table, which actually sets out the changes over this period. And when you look back, you look at the changes in the tiers, which happened on the 2nd of December. And we also saw then on midnight, the 30th of December, the January 4th. And this really reflects the incredible pressure and the changes that we've experienced, particularly Rushcliffe, as infections changes, the government reacted. And as we moved from the tier 3 to tier 4, and then of course we're now under the national lockdown, as we set out there. Of course, what's particularly important for us, as set out in that table, is the closure of our leisure centres. As Councillor Moore has talked about the impact that has had in terms of our finances, etc. If we look at item 4.5, it goes through many of the actions, and I'm not going to detail them all. That the council has really responded to all these changes in there. They reflect a lot of changes in terms of with our communities, and of course with our businesses, in terms of our own facilities. Just a couple of items I'd just like to point out. I mentioned about the leisure centres, and that we have actually applied for funding, which to help our financial position with £100 million that's been made available. It's been a bit frustrating because, of course, we outsource our leisure centres, which disqualified us from funding from councils who operate leisure centres themselves, and we think that's very unfair. So I'm pleased that we've now got an application in, and we hope that this will benefit, because there's a lot of jobs, a lot of investment in our leisure centres, and they are absolute key community facilities. So I think that's very important. I'd also just like to reflect on the huge amount of business support. Councillor Moore mentioned 37 million that we've put in since the pandemic started. This is just over £7 million since December. And again, real tribute to our revenues team, who've responded so quickly to businesses once the government got the parameters for these grants out and the money came in. Absolute lifeline. And the council has played a really important and strategic part in supporting our businesses as we actually go forward. Just moving on to some of the community facilities, obviously very important has been the test and trace. As we've seen, we've had the facilities at the Rini now running now for a few months, so it's good to see that that is being well used. And of course, one of the first community vaccine centres was at our community centre there at Gamston. So again, I'm very pleased that that was put up very quickly. It seems to run very well and has vaccinated many, many thousands of people, and will play a very, very important part in terms of we go forward. Obviously, there have been a lot of financial implications. This is reflected in our budgets, and so we won't be covering these in this report. So again, I'd like to thank officers, to all the teams who are out there in the many different roles who are supporting our communities and our businesses. To all the members as well, who are playing a very, very important part in their communities and their wards in supporting the people out there in this very, very, very tough time. So I'd just like to move that recommendation that the Cabinet notes the work of officers of the Council and partners in responding to and supporting the recovery from COVID-19. Do I have a second? Councillor Ediving.
Thank you, Chairman. The Cabinet does indeed note the work of officers in responding to and supporting recovery from COVID-19, and you've gone through many of the things that we've done. I think it's fair to say that many businesses in Rushcliffe have survived because of the government's support in this unprecedented times, and this council's officers have been fast to respond, and businesses across the borough have been very grateful for the speed of that response. which has provided reassurance and put them in a position to plan a survival strategy. And I've had in my with my cabinet portfolio, I've had many businesses say how grateful they are for that and how well we've responded as a council. But it's not just businesses, it's all of our other services, and it's how we've managed our bin service. I think it's worth remembering at the start of the pandemic, we were one of the few councils that maintained our bin service when many others were taking away services. We have a planning team that have carried on working in the pandemic, and we've continued to give customer services advice through customer services, even though face-to-face appointments haven't been possible or have been restricted. We've still been there to help. So I'm very happy to support the recommendation that notes the work that our officers do in this difficult time.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Edwin. I think one of the key words that really underpins this report is adaptability. In that you think now we're coming now to nearly 12 months that we've actually been under the pandemic. Obviously, this reflecting just the last 2 months, and we've seen the changes. So it's a real credit to adaptability in all departments and the way we think, the way we work, the way we deliver our services. It has been incredibly challenging. And as you say, you mentioned things like refuse collection, which is so important to our residents, and the fact that we have kept the planning going, the fact that we've got the money out to the businesses when we can, but also we've been working very hard, of course, still with our capital projects as well, as we talked a lot about things like the crematorium and the business, the hub there at Bingham as well. These are also a lot of work in the background that we've kept going, so I think it's well worth noting those as well. So this recommendation is set out there on item 2, proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Edwin. Anybody wish to object or abstain? No, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 10. This is the electoral review of Rushcliffe. This actually is a review that was requested by the Local Government Boundary Commission, and effectively asks us that we've to look at the work and the boundaries right across Rushcliffe. And what this paper really does is present our recommendations that will be submitted to full council actually on March full council, which is next month, isn't it, of 2021. One of the main drivers, particularly of this review, is going to be the proposed population increases across Rushcliffe. This is from the period of 2020 up to 2027, and we're looking at an increase of 18%. Which will take the average residents per councillor from 2,058 to 2,509, which is obviously a big increase. And of course, we've got 2 very, very major contributors to that in terms of developments, in that we have Gamston, of course, where the first plan application came in before Christmas, and that we also have Fareham, of course, which has now been given outline permission, and I'm sure detailed planning permission will be coming in shortly. So these 2 developments alone are going to contribute nearly 4,000 additional electorate into the borough of Rushcliffe. So it's very important, as this this report reflects. We also, during the review of this report, talked to councillors about their workload, and we set it against a template which is actually set out on page 140 on section 4.2. And as this sets out there, as you can see, this covers in which the context the council operates, our strategic leadership, accountability and community involvement. So it's a fairly comprehensive sort of template which we actually put that against. So following these discussions, the recommendation is that we would like to see an increase of up to 46 from the present 44 councillors. And we also welcome a review in the summer coming up of actually the boundaries of the wards as well, because obviously the dynamics of Rushcliffe in terms of population will have a big impact right across the borough, and we do welcome that along with the increase in councillors, will also be reviewed this summer of looking at the actual boundaries themselves of the wards. And as I say, with some of them possibly going from 1 to 2 councillors. But as I say, this report will go to full council in March for discussion before it actually goes forward from there. I think it's worth just mentioning there is a cost attached to this, and this is very important, again, to imprudent, that the cost is going to be around another £11,000 for 2 extra councillors. Then on top of that, of course, there will be some expenses and training costs as well. So we should obviously bear in mind that there is actually going to be financial costs of these recommendations. So without further ado, I'd like to move the recommendations that are set out on page 139 on section 2. Sorry, as I just draw those up. So that's really endorsing the review of the council side, proposes the increase in number of councillors for the borough to 46 councillors, subject to full council approval in March 2021, and requests the Chief Executive makes arrangements for the review to be sent to the Commission as a council's draft submission, subject to full council in March 2021. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwin.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I think you've very much covered a lot of the things I was had highlighted as well. And obviously this started with the starting point of the Local Government Boundary Commission, and it's very much an independent assessment. And as you say, they've looked at the workload of councillors and other factors, the distribution of our population. And, you know, we are looking at an 18% increase in our population within the borough up to 2027. So the recommendation, I do believe, does strike a balance that maintains the councillor's role within their community. So although we will see, if you like, the number of residents per councillor increase, having 2 extra councillors does help mitigate that without adversely affecting the ability of councillors to carry out their role in the community. And of course, it also gives councillors a full role in helping with the business of the council and all of our committees. Obviously, there are changes in population and they're occurring in different places across the borough. And the next stage of this review will be to ensure that the boundaries reflect the changing population pattern in the borough. So I'm very happy to second the recommendations as set out by Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, so those recommendations as set out by myself, seconded by Councillor Edwin. Anybody wishes to object or abstain against those recommendations? No. Okay, so they are carried unanimously. So we move now to the final item of the agenda tonight, item number 11, should I say. This is the Rushcliffe Nature Conservation Strategy for 2021 to 2025. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, I'm really delighted to bring this document, this strategy to Cabinet. I think it reflects, you've been talking about ambition, I think this reflects our ambition across a whole range of agendas, conservation, wildlife, habitat and development that Councillor Upton talked about earlier. We're rightly proud of the natural heritage of the borough, and we're very keen and committed to playing our part in ensuring that it's enhanced and protected now and for future generations. It's critically important that the significant growth projected to take place across the borough, which you've just referred to as well in terms of council representation, is sustainable, and that it takes account of conservation issues and the biodiversity net gains that are likely to be required from government's emerging, but I understand now delayed, environment bill that Councillor Roger Upton also talked about earlier. It's a very comprehensive strategy. I hope people have had a chance to have a look at it. It's not quite as lengthy as Councillor Moore's document, but it is nonetheless a lengthy one, but an interesting one, and one that you can dip in and out of, I hope. It was drawn together by the Nature Conservation Strategy Implementation Group, which is jointly headed by ourselves, the Borough Council and Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. And it includes a broad range of key partners, including the County Council, the Nottinghamshire Biodiversity Action Group, various local wildlife groups, conservation groups, parish council, friends of, and local interest groups. By way of brief background, The previous strategy ran until last year, 2020, and the achievements of that strategy are set out on pages 8 to 9 of the document, which I think is about page 200 of the Cabinet papers. In order to protect and build on those successes, we now need a new strategy. And furthermore, in July last year, Council resolved that the Community Scrutiny Group should consider planting wildflower seeds across Council-owned grasslands. And last year, our extremely successful free tree scheme came to its first conclusion. So these priorities have now been built into the new strategy, and there's a recommendation tonight that Cabinet approves a £50,000 budget between 2021 and 2025 to fund this new initiative, so wildflower, seeding and free trees and community groups. The implementation groups worked hard to pull this together. It's comprehensive, it's partnership based, and it's been through the communities group and out for public consultation during November and December last year. It aims to project and enhance nature conservation across the borough to help mitigate the impacts of climate change and provide access to wildlife-rich green spaces for our residents. There's now a clear emphasis in the strategy on species-rich grassland, wetlands, trees, woodland habitats, and on protecting the species particularly characteristic of the borough. And there is also a clear emphasis on biodiversity. Objectives include the creation and management of new habitats, the promotion of landscape scale conservation, which is really interesting, and the sympathetic land management for wildlife in both rural and urban areas, seeking to ensure biodiversity net gain from development, as covered earlier, and in terms of improving the overall green experience for residents, for wildlife and for conservation. I'd also like to finally add that so much of this strategy relies on the work and dedication of so many partner organisations across the borough. This is not solely something that the Borough Council can itself deliver. And it's important that that network and the army of passionate volunteers and groups who give their time freely to support these projects is recognised and encouraged. And part of the strategy is to promote that work and look to attract more people to give their time to help preserve, conserve and protect our natural environment. So therefore, I would like to move that the Cabinet supports the recommendations contained in the paper at paragraph 2, namely to endorse and adopt this new strategy, to agree to fund the free tree scheme as part of the strategy with a budget of 50,000 over the period 21 to 25, and to support the distribution of the wildflower seeds, and that the Council works with neighbouring planning authorities to introduce biodiversity net gain policies to complement the strategy's objectives. I'd like to commend that to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Upton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm very pleased to second this report. This council, I think, can be very proud of its nature conservation strategies since 2003. But now's the time to make a step change, I think, and adopt this new strategy up to 2025. We have significant challenges around climate change, rising population, and our locally improved housing growth, all of which put pressure on our natural environment. Our new housing developments must, in my opinion, be as sustainable as possible and include biodiversity. And I mentioned this early on, biodiversity net gains, when I responded to a member of the public's question. And indeed, as I said then, the government's Environment Bill proposes at least a 10% biodiversity net gain for all new developments. So I'm pleased also to see a recommendation that the free tree scheme is to be continued. I think that's been very successful. And the introduction of the wildflower seeds and the creation of some wildflower grasslands, I think, is to be applauded. As I say, the new strategy has been produced with our partner organisations, and that's good. And it's been to public consultation and to scrutiny groups. So it's a good new strategy, and it's one that I'm very pleased to support. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. I think just a couple of things I'd just like to say. I would like to echo Councillor Brennan, a big thank you for the volunteers and the partner organisations who've worked very hard, because without them, the implementation of this would be virtually impossible. I think as a council, it's absolutely key we work with these partners, And it's tremendous to see these volunteers who really contribute so much to the work that's needed, because as an authority, we're quite unique to have such wonderful and diverse areas right across the borough, but they do need a lot of nurturing and preserving. And as Councillor Upton says, it's a lot of pressure with the amount of development that's going on right across the authority to make sure that we do preserve these and we improve them. And I'm also very pleased to see that this call really to work with other planning authorities to really bring the standards up as well, and to get really environmentally friendly policies going forward. Because if we can coordinate that, I think it becomes even more powerful, have a bigger impact on Rushcliffe. But when I compare it to a lot of other authorities, we should be very proud of what we've done. And this policy really is ambitious again, just like the word we've used many times tonight. I think it is very ambitious, and I'm delighted that Councillor Brennan, that you brought that tonight, and I'm very happy to support those recommendations. Any other comments at all? Yeah, Councillor Irving.
Yeah, I'd probably just like to add that as well as all the volunteers, certainly from my experience of being involved with parish councils across the borough, this will be welcomed by parish councils as well, because I know it's nature conservation and having a clear strategy is something that's very, parish councils are very keen to promote, and so I'm sure they'll be welcoming it too.
Absolutely, and you know, especially in terms of the Wildlife Trust as well. I think they're doing a tremendous job in the authority. I think it's an excellent organisation. So those recommendations are set out, section 3, and it's page 188, by the way, Councillor Brennan, in terms of the been set out there. Seconded by Councillor Upton. Do we have any objections or anybody who would like to abstain? No, that's fully supported. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes then the Cabinet meeting for tonight. I'd like to thank everyone indeed for their contribution, and hope you have a very safe evening, and hope to see you again very